everyone, I'm Rebecca and welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about historical footwear, and specifically we are talking about footwear that is for use for historical costumers. So not necessarily 100% historical accuracy, all of the background history, etc. If you are looking for videos like that, definitely check out Nicole Rudolph's channel. If you have not seen her videos, she is an expert on footwear, and I will link her down below in the description. But today we are talking about good alternatives for costume shoes, historical costume shoes that maybe won't cost you an arm and a leg. So although we are going to look at some American Duchess shoes, because I do have a fair amount of American Duchess shoes, especially some of their older models, I'm also going to be showing you some of my favorite alternatives that can be bought on Amazon, eBay, maybe even at your local thrift store, just kind of the sort of elements that you should be looking for each of the decades from the 18th century through really the 19-teens. So let's go ahead and dive in. We are going to be doing this chronologically, starting with the 18th century. And I'm going to link to as many of these shoes as I possibly can down in the description below. I'm also going to write down some of the names of them because some of them might be easier to find, like if you are searching through eBay as opposed to like listings on Amazon, just if they're discontinued. So yeah, definitely go check out the description below here because that will have all of the resources that you are looking for this video. So starting with the 18th century. Now for 18th century shoes, I do use American Duchess shoes. I have 3 pairs of American Duchess. This is one of them right here. These are the Kensingtons. These are all really old. All of my American Duchess 18th century shoes are all really old. If you have watched some of my recent videos, like the one where I cleaned up my sewing room, you may have heard me complaining about the quality of one of my pairs of 18th century American Duchess shoes, and that is another pair of Kensingtons here. And these ones I have only worn a few times, but the lining is also falling apart on these. The other ones just completely disintegrated. The lining is like gone and the sole's been peeling off, etc. So just kind of buyer beware with some of their shoes because they don't have a great customer service team to back up any issues with their shoes. Just as a heads up, I told them that I was having those issues after like the second time that I wore them, and they said, "Oh, did you follow our painting tutorial?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Oh, that's why." Anyway, I digress. So what you are looking for in an 18th century shoe is this general shape right here. So you have a Louis heel. That's this nice curvy heel. That's what this is called, is a Louis heel. And you can see that it's kind of centered underneath the heel of the foot. A lot of modern shoes, when you're looking at them, you are going to see heels that are very much on the back, like the back edge of the shoe. And kind of across the board, frankly, when you are looking at historical footwear and you're looking at options for historical footwear, the best thing that you can do is look for shoes whose heel is more centered underneath your own heel. Honestly, it's going to be more comfortable too. I find that this type of heel is way more comfortable to wear because you have the support where you want the support. The other thing to look for, and again, this is also kind of an across the board through all of history type thing, is this sort of curvy heel. Now, 18th century heels were kind of the most curvy. You get this really, really nice slope going in there, but even later you will see that shoes still retained a lot of that curve. Honestly, like through the 20s and 30s, I think it was probably the 40s when that curve of the heel finally started to go away. So if you're looking for pretty much any historical shoe, if you have a nice curvy heel on there, that is just fantastic. The other thing that you're going to find about 18th century shoes is this sort of lap over here. So we have 2 pieces of the shoe that stick out like this, and they come across where the tongue just sticks up. And this one is being closed with a slider buckle that I found on eBay, but the American Duchess buckles are more complicated, and that's what a lot of the actual shoe buckles were. They kind of had like a really sharp point that went in and held everything together, and you poke holes through the leather, etc. The slider buckle honestly has worked just fine on here, so if you do wind up with this type of shoe, you don't have to go find one of those buckles. This is probably from the 1920s, and it just slides right on and works great. But you don't have to necessarily have this exact style when you are looking at 18th century options. So for example, I found this shoe right here. This is from a company called Super Lady Star. I do have one of their other pairs of shoes, not this style. So I don't know if this one is great, etc. I can say that I really do like the one pair of shoes that I've bought from them, but this is kind of giving those 18th century vibes. Now, granted, this only comes in this one colorway, and all of these shoes are supposedly like hand painted, so it almost seems a shame if you wanted to repaint them, but it's a good option. Another 18th century option that will save you some money over American Duchess, though is still kind of expensive and is still really a specialized shoe, is a company called Fugui. Now, I do actually have some Fugui boots that I'll be speaking about later. I've never tried their 18th century shoes, but they have some really basic styles of 18th century shoes that, at least as of the filming of this video, they're on sale. They seem to be about $99. So again, still expensive, but not American Duchess levels of expensive. If you do want American Duchess shoes, they do tend to do sales, it seems like twice a year. I think there's usually one around Black Friday, and there's usually one for Bastille Day. So obviously that one has happened recently, but Black Friday would still be coming up. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind if you are thinking about American Duchess shoes, that if you can wait for a sale, that is great. You'll save a lot of money. Sometimes you can also find shoes that will kind of work for 18th century looks by going onto someplace like Amazon and searching for like witch shoes or pilgrim shoes, because those are terms where you will get some of those elements of 18th century style, obviously in a much more costumey manner, but they do exist. And I found a couple of them. I'll leave links down below in the description. But yeah, you can get away with doing something like that if you want a much less expensive option, because those do tend to be more like around $30 to $60 as opposed to, you know, the $99 for Fugui or like the $200 for American Duchess. Another option that you can do if you're feeling crafty is that you can actually alter shoes so that you get that sort of like tongue look coming up with the laps and everything. You can kind of alter that. So if you find a shoe that maybe has some of the other hallmarks, like it has a higher vamp up here, it has maybe that curvier heel, and maybe it has a toe shape that you like, you can go and you can create this part out of like fabric or leather scraps and attach it to your shoe. There's a lot of tutorials out there for how to do that. A lot of them came around like kind of before American Duchess even was on the market, and if you dig through YouTube, you can definitely find those tutorials, or through blogs. I haven't personally tried any of those, but it's definitely an option. Like if you find a shoe that you like, maybe something like this shape, for example, which again, I will talk about this later because this is something I used for Victorian, but you can go and you can add on that sort of piece to give you that look here. 18th century, of course, is a time when a lot of the hemlines were a little bit shorter, so you do tend to see the shoes, which is why finding a shoe that maybe is a little bit more appropriate is a good thing. Whereas like later in the Victorian period, a lot of times you're never going to see those shoes. But again, we'll get into that more when we get to that era. Now, just to let you know, this video really is going to focus on women's shoes and not men's shoes. Sorry guys, I just don't know men's footwear. I think with a lot of times you can kind of get away with like a men's dress shoe, and even for 18th century, like add on that sort of piece if you want to do that. Fugui again carries men's shoes as well, and actually American Duchess carries men's shoes too. So there are options out there for men's shoes, but I am not very knowledgeable about them, so this is all going to focus on women's shoes. So moving along into the Regency period, I like to talk about the Regency period as one of the eras that I find is most approachable for beginner costumers. And there are a variety of reasons for that. I mean, for one, the dresses are really easy to make. You can get away without a lot of structural support garments, etc. And a lot of people really love Jane Austen or Bridgerton or that sort of thing, so people are really drawn to the Regency period to begin with. But the other nice thing about the Regency period is really, really easy footwear. So Regency period, your ballet flats, they're gonna do just fine. Now, ideally, really, if we want to be a little bit more historically accurate, it's great to find a ballet flat that has a pointy toe. So this, for example, this is a shoe from Dream Pair Shoes. I believe this style is still sold, hopefully. So I will link this down below. You can get Dream Pair Shoes on Amazon or through their website. And I love this pointy toe right here. This is perfect for Regency really, really is. And this was a really inexpensive shoe, which is fantastic. But you don't even have to go for that pointy toe. The Regency flats that I wore for years and years were these like $10 white flats from Walmart that I went in and I decorated. They're super dusty because I've owned them for so long. But as you can see, I just put a little bow detail on there just with some folded vintage ribbon. And I even drew on little seams right here. So these seams, you can find them a lot on historical shoes, so that's a great addition to put on there. And then what I like to do with a lot of my Regency shoes, especially if I'm going to be wearing them for dancing, is I like to attach ribbons. I literally glue these ribbons on in the inside of the shoe, and these ribbons will lace around your ankle like a ballet shoe does, and that keeps your shoes on when you're dancing, because otherwise, frankly, ballet shoes always fall off my feet, especially if you're wearing them with stockings, which you should be. But yeah, with the ribbons on, they stay on really nicely. I do find, personally for me, one of the difficult things about the Regency period is that all of these shoes are very flat, and my feet don't like very flat shoes. So if that is something that you run into as well, you do also see a kitten heel, especially in the 1790s, but also a little bit later into the Regency period. You can see that really just tiny kitten heel. I don't have any examples here to show you, but here's a picture of one. So if your foot works better with a heel situation as opposed to a totally flat shoe, that might be a good option for you. But in the Regency period, women didn't just wear flats, they also wore boots, and they wore really, really simple boots. This is for like if you're going out walking instead of going to a ball. Their boots were flat boots. They tended to have that pointy toe just like the ballet flats did. And I find that for me, I wear these boots right here. These are called the Darcy boots. They are by Comfort View, and these can be found two places, at least two places that I've found. They can be found on Amazon. So that's nice and easy because then there's usually a good return policy, etc. However, they are usually more expensive on Amazon. Right now, I noticed, and I'm probably going to get myself a new pair too because I go through one of these every few years, just because I wear them so much. We'll go over how many eras that I wear these shoes for. But these shoes can also be found on a site called Women Within. Kind of one of those like old lady sites, you know, no offense to any old ladies out there because we're going to be talking about a lot of old lady shoe type sites today. But right now on Women Within, these shoes are only $30. So that's a really great price. Normally they're more like $50 on Amazon. Obviously you probably have to pay for shipping on sites besides Amazon, but these are so wonderfully simple. There's no zippers anywhere on this shoe. They're just a nice flat shoe. They are designed so that I think you can also wear them with the top folded down if you're going for that like Peter Pan look. I always just fold mine up. They're relatively comfortable, but they also do fit like a little heel support or arch support type insole in them. And I wear these for so many different eras. I wear these for everything from Regency through the 1860s, like the early 1860s. And I also actually, these are my go-to boots for like going to the Ren Fair because they're comfy enough and they're sturdy and they're good in a middle of a field. And then I've also worn these in theatrical productions. Most recently I wore these at The Baker's Wife in Into the Woods, and I've worn these in Little Women lots and lots of times. That's why I go through these so often. I do find that every few years when you are wearing them that much, the soles want to tend to come off. So you could of course take that to your cobbler. I use shoe glue. I think it's called shoe goo, and I just glue my soles back on. But I think it's probably about time for a new pair just because there's only so many times you can re-glue a sole, and I think I'm also starting to wear through the sole at this point too. Again, I wear these so often. Honestly, I probably wear these more than probably any other pair of my costuming shoes, except possibly the Renoirs from American Duchess, which we will get to very shortly. So let's move into the 1830s. That is one of my favorite eras. Now, where the Regency period, we really liked those pointy toes on our shoes, the 1830s was all about the square toe. They were so into the square toe. And to be honest, that square toe lasted all the way through the 1850s as well. So all of these shoes that I'm talking about here for 1830s, this is the exact same for 1840s, 1850s, even the early 1860s with that square toe. So you have a lot of options. You can find square toe flats. The heel was gone at this point. They didn't keep that kitten heel around at all. These are all flat shoes from this era. Now, my favorite square-toed flats actually are an old pair of Payless shoes that I am really worried are gonna die someday. So I try to keep them in very good condition. That's why I still store them in their box and everything, even though they cost me like, you know, $20. And those are Christian Siriano shoes from Payless. If you can find these like on eBay, highly, highly recommend. They are the Claudia style and they are great. They're really the perfect 1830s shoes. I did glue the ribbons on here just like I did with the Regency flats, but frankly, this shape of shoe, this is ideal for the 1830s. The only thing that could have made it better was just having the vamp come up even just a little bit more. And otherwise, like, these are fantastic. But there are other places that do square toes as well. I've seen them on Amazon. I have seen them in like random Facebook ads. I think square toes came back into style last year for a little bit, so you might be able to find some on eBay or at thrift stores. I don't think most places are doing square toe now. For a while, there was actually a Jessica Simpson brand shoe that had a square toe that looked really good. And don't forget that for a lot of these shoes, because they are kind of old-fashioned looking, you can actually often find them at places like JCPenney online or Macy's or something like that, like department stores. And a lot of times they get discounted because they are not the fashion anymore to have that square toe. But yeah, that's what you want, is you want the square toe. That said, I still wear these boots for the 1830s. You could also, if you wanted to spend a little bit more money, Fugui has some nice square-toed boots. These are more designed as 1850s or 1860s shoes, and yes, I did paint these. So I forget what color they originally were. I have two pairs, and I think they both came as sort of an ivory with like red detailing, I think. I've painted both of them, so, and that was years and years ago. These are hard to get on. They do come with a shoehorn, but they are elastic. The buttons are faux, and this elastic is tight. So it is hard to get these on, and they are completely flat. So they are not the most comfortable if you are not good with flat shoes that don't have padding in them. But however, they work decently as a costume shoe if you are not going to be on your feet for very long. And again, I wear these for, I mean, these ones I painted to match an 1830s archery outfit. And I think my other ones, I have one that matches like an 1860s, my 1860s kids Victorian outfit. So these are really great again for that variety of periods. They do have the square toe, which is so great. And I love the little like toe detail, the contrast detail. And of course you can paint these any color that you like with some leather paints. I use Angelus leather paints when I paint any of my shoes. Another option besides painting your shoes though is actually getting dyeable shoes. So these shoes actually I bought from David's Bridal because dyeable shoes are often found at bridal shops. So some of them you can probably find on like Amazon, etc. But literally I bought these from davidsbridal.com several years ago, and I dyed them to match a dress because I really wanted the orange shoes that she was wearing in the fashion plate because this was 1830s and all of the shoes show in the 1830s. So yeah, this was a super, super easy process. I think I used literally Rit dye for this, and although they don't have the square toe, this is a really great just basic ballet flat, and it totally works for any of these eras, Regency through the 1850s into the early 1860s. And I think that these were about like $20 or $30 for these dyeable shoes. Again, you can find dyeable shoes lots of different places. So let's move on to later in the Victorian era when shoe shapes started to get a little bit more distinct and they started to change. The biggest change is that they started to bring back heels. So you see very, very low heels, especially to start like in the later 1860s, and you do still see that square toe. The square toe really didn't go away until I think about the 1870s was when we start to get the pointy toe back as opposed to the square toe. So these are my American Duchess Renoir boots. If you are going to buy any one pair of shoes from American Duchess, buy these. Seriously, these are so comfortable. They are by far my most comfortable pair of American Duchess shoes. I love them. I think that they are just so great. They're adorable too. I mean, like, look at the buttons. Look at that. And of course, with American Duchess, they're all functional buttons. So you do need a button hook, which you can find probably at an antique store or a thrift store that might be cheaper than the ones that American Duchess sells. But yeah, they have a very, very low heel. So, you know, you're not impacted by a high heel on here. I find that about a 1-inch heel is about the most comfortable thing for my foot. And these are great. These ones are leather, and I think that they work really well. I've worn them in shows. I've worn them to so many costume events. I've worn them just out and about. I really, really love these shoes. With any American Duchess shoes too, if you are especially going to be wearing them a lot outside, you can go to the cobbler and have rubber soles put on because I think most, if not all of their shoes come with leather soles. So you might want to do a little bit more protecting. But I mean, I wear these out and around in the Seattle area. And even though I haven't put those rubber soles on, they have been doing just fine. Then when we move later into the Victorian era, let's talk about options now for pumps as opposed to flats, like if you are going for an evening look or a dinner look. And then also let's talk about some of the boot options that you can do. Now, of course, they're still gonna be fine. Like if you wanna just wear these for basically everything, go for it. These are really a great boot. Highly, highly recommend. Again, the Darcy bootie. That's really, really great. But if you want more specialized shoes, I do have a couple of pair of American Duchess shoes, some of which I've barely worn. Like these, honestly, I shouldn't have bought them. I had been wanting them forever and they didn't have my size, and they finally brought them in size 12, which is my size because I have huge feet, and I bought them. And I think I've worn them like once because I'm always too afraid of like the canvas not doing well, and they have a pointier toe than my other American Duchess shoes. And so yeah, these are the Manhattans. I would not recommend those. I would get the Tavistocks instead. These are their first run of Tavistocks, so these might be a little bit different, but I love these things. Just like the Renoirs, they are pretty comfortable, though not quite as comfortable as the Renoirs because they do have a higher heel. They also go higher up the leg. I don't find that that makes things any different. And then of course they have a pointier toe, but not quite as pointy. Sorry for the jump cut, my battery died. So what I was saying was these are more comfortable also because they have a less pointy toe than the Manhattans, but I don't know if that is necessarily true for the newest incarnations of the Tavistocks, or if they now all look like this as well and they're just fully leather, because these ones are fully leather. Either way, these types of boots will run you quite a lot of money. I think that American Duchess boots are somewhere in the realm of, I don't know, $225 to $300, somewhere in there. That is an insane amount of money, honestly. I got these all way, way, way cheaper than that, particularly because most of them are very, very old. And because American Duchess has really, really raised their prices recently. So let's talk about some alternatives for Victorian, later Victorian boots. And honestly, this type of boot style stayed the same through the 1920s. So all of these will work even through the 1920s. So a really popular brand that I believe still exists that I've never had the opportunity to try because they are not size inclusive, and I don't even think they carry size 11, let alone size 12, is Oak Tree Farms, which I believe you can find on Amazon and various other retailers. They, to be honest, have boots specifically that look the most historically accurate, like more so than the American Duchess ones. There's just something about the shape. They look like antiques. However, I think they're still fairly expensive. The ones that I go for are Phantasma brand. Now, Phantasma is like a drag queen and costume, like super Halloween costume type brand. And to be honest, I think they are phasing this style of shoe out. This is called the Dame. However, they also have a Dame that has a much shorter ankle. It's really more of an ankle boot, but this is all lace in here. And what I liked about these was that they didn't have a zipper. So when I was especially first starting out with costuming and I didn't have any of these other boots, they carried my size for Phantasma. They were still a little bit expensive for me at the time just because I had less money to spend on costume stuff. I think when I first got into them, I want to say they were around $60. Again, they are phasing these out. So on Amazon, if you look up Phantasma, that's F-U-N-T-A-S-M-A, Dame, at this point, that's Dame, D-A-M-E, at this point, you are going to find listings for like individual sizes. So you might have a better time on eBay, or try like just, shop Google and see what it pulls up for you. I don't know who all still has these, if Phantasma is in fact phasing them out. I find that these are actually pretty darn comfortable. I have worn these shoes for like a day at con and been okay. I mean, by the end of the day, my feet still hurt, but that's gonna happen regardless. So for a shoe that's like relatively inexpensive, it's fairly comfortable. It actually breathes really well because there's just kind of a mesh behind the lace that is really causing the support of the shoe. So even though we're looking at like total, pleather down here and with the tongue, there's a lot of breathing that's happening with the rest of the shoe. Oh, they also don't stain your stockings like all of the American Duchess shoes are. I don't know. I have that issue with almost every single pair of American Duchess shoes. I don't know what red dye 40 they're using on the inside of their like leather linings, but I have found that if you wear nylon stockings in particular with American Duchess shoes, that red stain will never come out of your stockings. Cotton, it does tend to wash out of. But yeah, just to warn you, don't wear nice stockings with your nice shoes because your nice shoes are not well made. Anyway, so if you can find the Phantasma boots, great. Again, that ankle boot is going to work just fine as well, though I do personally prefer the look of the higher boot. I also love that they have the easy lacing like you get on ice skates, where you just kind of, whip it over and you don't have to go through every single little eyelet. So yeah, these are great shoes and they've lasted me for ages. I mean, I think I bought my first pair of these probably in like 2011, maybe 2012. And over that time, I have had, I think, 2 different black ones and 1 pair of ivory. You do have to be careful about wearing these on sand. I know that's specific, but if you wear these on sand, the sand will get trapped between the mesh and the lace. And if you are wearing the ivory ones on sand, it will then stain that mesh like a dirty brown color. So don't wear these boots on sand. So let's talk about Victorian pumps. Now, Victorian pumps really did vary a lot in style, but some of the hallmarks that you still see, and we're talking about later Victorian here, some of the hallmarks that you still see are still those kind of slightly curvier heels, just like I was talking about before with the 18th century, and also a really high vamp. And the vamp is the part that comes over the top of your foot here. Generally speaking, in most historical styles, you see higher vamps just across the board. And so that is kind of the hard part when you are looking at modern day shoes to look like Victorian or any other era of shoe, until really the Edwardian was when it started to drop that vamp down, is that it's really hard to find shoes with a high vamp. So this is one of the highest ones that I found. These shoes right here are called, they are Mark Lemp brand, and it is called the Vicky. You can still find these in limited sizes on Amazon, just like with the Phantasma. They have been being phased out, honestly, for years. I got them when they were already starting to be phased out. There are still limited sizes out there, so highly recommend the Mark Lemp Vicky. They are relatively comfortable, but not the best. I wouldn't put these on for like more than 2 hours probably, but that's just my feet. I like that they have a very slight curve. Obviously it should be more of a curve. And I like that they have a slightly higher vamp. Obviously should be more of a vamp. But these shoes come in multiple colors and textures. I have these and I have black like cloth ones, and they do pretty darn well for Victorian era. And of course also with the Victorian era, really your shoes are not going to be seen. Like, your skirts are long enough. We're talking from 1840s through, I mean, frankly, like the 1900s, your skirts are covering your shoes. The only exception to that would be like a fancy dress costume, something like that. That's when your shoes matter. But otherwise, your shoes don't matter as much in the Victorian era. That's really all there is to say. Now, that said, I do have 1 pair of American Duchess shoes that are supposed to be later Victorian. These have a rounder toe. You see a lot of different toe shapes in this era. So you do see round, you see pointy, you see square. All of those are fine. But you can see what I'm talking about with this heel shape. This is a pretty good example of what you see or what you want to see for a later Victorian shape. And this also has that slightly higher vamp as well. Also for boot options, especially for those of you with smaller size feet, you can literally go onto Amazon and search Victorian boot, and there's so many now that are available for if you have smaller feet, that there's lots of options out there where you don't have to worry about zippers, etc. And you get pretty good looking shoes. Obviously, I've never tried any of those because I don't have smaller feet. So for Edwardian shoes, Edwardian is where you start to get a lot of different design styles, particularly on the vamp of the shoe, because skirts were getting shorter, the shoes were being seen. And so people started to get really creative shoe designers in the Edwardian era. So this is a pair of American Duchess shoes that I have. Now I have to say, Phantasma has also knocked off these shoes. So you can find shoes that look really, really similar to this through Phantasma. I don't know what they're called, and I don't necessarily recommend them because I did try one time the other shoes that Phantasma had knocked off from American Duchess, and they were unbearably uncomfortable. I returned them immediately because they were awful. So that said, I don't find these particularly comfortable either. I have worn them for shows and my feet have just like killed me after the show. So I can make it through, but they're not the most comfortable. I have them in 2 colors. These are the Astorias, I think, and they're very pretty, but they are not the most comfortable shoes. Another shape that they brought back in the Edwardian era was sort of an 18th century looking shape. Now, these were kind of a one-off shoe that I found. These were like a bridal dyeable type shoe again. And these I found from a seller on Etsy. The brand is Abby Goodfellow, but the seller was selling like bridal related stuff, and then I dyed them yellow. They were white. So these are really nice. I did these for my Titanic deck dress, put a little shoe clip on there, and that's a really nice shape that is really great for this era. Again, this is where you want to look at those like old lady shoe stores. So check like Blair.com or look at like Easy Street Shoes, or there's some other brands out there like Trotters even. These are where you can really find, especially for Victorian and for Edwardian shoes. Just as an example, now these were Beacon shoes that I got from Bedford Fair. I don't think Bedford Fair even exists anymore, and these shoes are falling to pieces. I got these in 2012. But you can see I just added a little shoe clip decoration, and it's a pretty nice shape, got a nice strap detail. These work so great for Edwardian shoes. One other resource that you can use for Victorian and Edwardian and really in through the 1920s shoes are actually character shoes. So these are what actors tend to wear on stage. They are called character shoes, and they are a really basic shape of shoe right here. So you can see that we do have kind of a slightly higher vamp. Usually these do have a rounded but slightly pointy toe, and they have a nice curvy heel because people have been making these shoes the same for decades upon decades. Generally speaking, you find these with either a Mary Jane strap or a T-strap. T-strap is great if you're going for 20s, but you can probably get away with taking the strap off and wearing these as is, as long as you are not, you know, attempting to dance in them. They do all come with leather soles, but just like with the American Duchess shoes, you can take these to your cobbler and you can get a rubber sole put on the bottom. And frankly, you can get character shoes now for pretty inexpensively. There's all sorts of random companies making them with all different names on Amazon, but if you want to go for kind of the ones that tend to last the best, you're going to be wanting to look at like Capezio, Block, Sodanka, some of those standard dance brands. Those will probably last you better than the random $20 pair from some unknown name on Amazon. Also, especially if you have smaller feet, don't rule out thrifting. A lot of times you can find great shoes when thrifting. Always try them on with socks on. If you buy them, bring them home and clean them with Clorox wipes. Like, don't give yourself athlete's foot or something like that. I have really large feet, so I can almost never find shoes at thrift stores. However, the one time I think that I did, I found really freaking fantastic costume shoes. These are like the most perfect 1790s early Regency shoes. You can see the nice point in here. The rhinestones everywhere are freaking gorgeous, and they are honestly, I think they're silk. Like, I think it's actually a silk fabric, and the brand on these is just Ziggy Soho, but I found these at the thrift store for I think like $9 somehow in my size, and they're beautiful. I wore these with my English Regency court gown, and I've worn them to other Regency balls and stuff too, and although they are flat as a pancake, they work really, really great. So I think that is all of the shoe styles that I have to show you today. I would personally say that if you were going to go for, let's say, 3 shoes to kind of take you through any era, I would say get these, the Darcy boots. They're so great for so many eras. Get a super cheap pair of just ballet flats, whether you want to go for a pointy toe or stick with a round toe, etc. Just get like 1 pair of ballet flats. That's going to take you through a ton of eras. And get yourself, if you can find them, a kind of basic pump with that slightly higher rise, with that slightly curvy heel. Just get yourself something basic, because if you have those styles, that will take you through most eras. And then beyond that, if you do a lot of 18th century, save up, wait for a sale, and probably get yourself a pair of either American Duchess or Fugui shoes, just because the 18th century style is so freaking specific, and it's hard to do unless you're modifying one of these shoes, like I mentioned before. But yeah, that is all of my shoe information today. So hopefully this video was helpful for you and gave you some ideas of what to look out for when you are shoe shopping for historical costumes. If you have any historical costuming shoes, especially if they're ones that are pretty inexpensive and you just think like, oh my God, this is the best find ever, can you please leave those in the comments? Because that way all of us can learn from what your favorite shoes are. I think that would be really fantastic. And if you have any thoughts on maybe alternative historical footwear brands besides like American Duchess. Like for example, I know Memory, I think that's how you pronounce it, Memory shoes, which is based over in Europe. They have recently started being distributed in the US as well. I've never tried them because I'm nervous about like sizes not working for me. But if you have a lot of experience with Memory shoes, please leave some reviews of those in the comments, or any other brands as well. I would definitely love to hear from you. I'm sure that everyone else who's reading the comments would love to hear from you, because it's hard to find good historical shoes. I mean, heck, it's hard to find kind of the 1990s shaped shoes nowadays, and those tend to work so much better than what we have as modern shoes on the modern market. So yeah, please share in the comments, because I think that this would be a great moment of community when we can all learn from each other. But again, thank you so much for joining me today. If you liked this video, please go ahead and click the thumbs up icon. And if you'd like to see more videos like this from me, please go ahead and click subscribe and the little bell icon to be notified every time I post a new video. I do post videos here on YouTube at least once a week, usually with sewing vlogs out on Tuesdays, and sometimes with additional costuming and sewing related content out on Saturdays. But I post every day over on my Instagram, so please go follow me on Instagram. That's at Lady Rebecca Fashions. And if you'd like to help support all of the work that I do on this channel, I do have a link to my Patreon and my Ko-fi down in the description below, or you can send me a super thanks or join my YouTube channel memberships right here on YouTube below the video. I'd also like to give a special shout out to my Edwardian level patrons, Jean, Dan, and Kim. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Happy sewing!